what I would like the lesson to be from this show and kind of the way that people are approaching dating these days. I'm saying this as the hopefully the wise gay to the heterosexuals. What I notice is a lot of force. I don't think that that's unique to heterosexual people. I've seen it in the gay sphere, the gay verse, the LGBTQ verse. I've seen it. Because honestly, the LGBTQ community just mimics heteronormativity. They really do. When you exist as a straight person, so much of who you are and what you want is defined for you that it maybe is terrifying to have somebody or to have to figure that out for yourself. And so, but now we live in a day and age where there's a lot of people who are willing to step in and define that for you. And that may or may not be good. I would argue oftentimes it's not good, especially if the person who's doing so is not a licensed psychiatrist, psychologist, some therapist. If they're not that, I would question what they're saying, to be perfectly honest with you. But there's a lot of people with a lot of microphones, just like me, saying things to you just like I am. And it's not always good advice. And sometimes it's very harmful. I feel like I am unnecessarily complicating this process, specifically for like, there's like a specific vision that I have for literally just showing off the coffee and the creamer going into the coffee. And I just keep making a mess, trying to get the right camera angle. So I know that y'all are like, it seems like you already had like a working system for this. You know what I'm saying? Why are you switching it up so much? Because I'm hard-headed is the short answer for it. Hold on a second. Got it, that's on. It's in there. Now, see, anybody who's observant Hold on one second. Get this. Right. Now I brought the shot glasses back out, and that probably is a mistake, but I'm gonna keep trying it until I get it, because I feel like y'all can see the vision, right? Y'all can see the vision of me like putting a shot of creamer into this cup, right? Like I feel like y'all are there with me on that. The issue I feel is maybe with confidence, maybe I need to just do it faster and one at a time, is what I said to myself yesterday after I finished the other episode. So, here we go. Hold on a second. I'm nervous now. Hold on a second. Boom. See, y'all see it. I'm there. Now, I don't know that I necessarily need to. Hold on a second. Boom. Boom. Genius. I'm a genius. I don't know, man. Like, I recall mentioning it before. I don't know which episode it was. Hold on a second. I recall mentioning it before, saying that this is really just a thinly veiled attempt of me trying to show off me drinking coffee, right? I mean, forget about all the rest of it. So, since we were so successful with the coffee today, shout out to Red Bay. Drinking Red Bay again today. Red Bay is Oakland Irish roast. It's a dark roast, and it's amazing. I did really well with the coffee, but I just have to be honest. I have a topic. I actually have a whole bunch of topics that I wanted to talk about, but I didn't have like fully fleshed out ideas. I didn't know if I could talk about them for what would be the typical length of an episode for me. So we're gonna give it a shot. And today, this one's coming out on a Friday. We're a little bit more laid back with this, right? I think. So I wanted to talk about, on this episode, the Netflix reality dating show called The Ultimatum. Now, I want to start off by saying, because I'm sure that if you're anything like me, you don't actually watch reality dating shows. I don't watch reality dating shows. I don't really have a great reason for it, other than I don't particularly watch reality TV at all. But also, as with many things, there's not a tremendous amount of queer representation, gay representation in reality dating shows. I have yet to see any like serious attempt at, like a queer, gay, especially with black women, reality dating show. So most of that I just, I leave that to the straights for the most part. But a few weeks ago, I was listening to a podcast by some podcasters that I love and have been listening to for some years now. A podcast called For Colored Nerds. I originally started listening to them in, I think, 2000 and whichever year Get Out came out. Because I was looking for people's analysis of the movie Get Out, because I was like, what did I just see? I think we all felt that way when Get Out first came out. I wanted to hear everybody's opinion. And so I was scouring the internet and looking for anybody's take, particularly black people's take, on the movie Get Out. And I came across the podcast For Colored Nerds. Now, since that time, they actually left the podcast For Colored Nerds and started a different podcast with, I don't know, I don't understand the world of podcasting, to be perfectly honest with you, even though I have decided to sit myself in front of a mic for whatever reason. But they started a separate podcast with a company called Gimlet Media, and since then, Gimlet has gone belly up, and so they're back to making For Colored Nerds. So with their new episodes, one of the newer ones that they've made, they were discussing the relationship that black people have with reality dating shows, and if it's possible for them to actually be successful for black couples, for black people, because overwhelmingly dating shows kind of focus on white couples, and then there's like maybe like a token black person. Usually the if it's like a bachelorette type show, the person who's giving out the roses or choosing the partner is not black. Up until recently, there was I believe there's been a black bachelorette. I don't know if there's been a black bachelor yet. I don't watch any of that. Like, I didn't even know that them shows were still on, to be perfectly honest with you. I watched The Bachelor maybe once or twice when it first started. But yeah, I'm just not a reality dating show kind of a person, and I've not really analyzed deeply as to why. But since I've listened to the podcast by For Colored Nerds, I was really interested in kind of applying their analysis to an actual dating show. And so that's where the Ultimatum came in. I actually wasn't originally going to watch this, but I just saw a lot of people talking about it. And I don't know, maybe I got some FOMO or something. I was like, a lot of people are talking about this, and I want to know what they're talking about. I don't have anything else to do today. So I decided to watch the Ultimatum. And so I'm first going to give you my thoughts on the show. Then I'm going to circle back to probably discussing further For Colored Nerds and their take on Black people being in reality dating shows and how it affects us. And hopefully there will be a coherent show by the end of me rambling on for several minutes. Hopefully there will be something worth watching by the end of this. I don't know. So The Ultimatum is a dating show on Netflix. Netflix has been trying its hand at dating shows for a while now. I've not watched pretty much any of them. I have watched The Circle. I kind of enjoy The Circle. The Circle is one of those shows where I feel like a few more tweaks to the premise and a few more tweaks production-wise, and it'll be a really, really good show. It's messy and problematic, but I think actually I feel like it maybe needs to be just a little bit messier. But once they get there, you know what I'm saying, I feel like that's a decent, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, it really fit the pandemic in terms of like us all being locked inside. So watching other people do a competition show while also locked inside, I don't know. It felt like it made sense. Maybe it doesn't make sense anymore. I don't know. That's the only reality show that I think I've watched on Netflix. And I've certainly not watched any of the dating ones. But with this show, I guess the premise is essentially that there are couples that have been dating for a while, and one person in the couple is interested in taking it to the next level. Usually that means like moving in with each other and or getting married and or having kids. And then another person in the couple is not interested in that or is not ready for that. And so that's the premise of the show. And we've got, how many couples? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got 6 couples, 12 individuals. All of them are heterosexual couples. Let's put that out there. And I think that the first thing that I noticed is that they were all overwhelmingly young. They are all babies. Like, I mean, the oldest person on the show is 30. The second oldest person on the show is 28, but overwhelmingly they're in their kind of early 20s. And that was a huge, well, let me back up a little bit. So the premise of the show was the huge red flag for me immediately. The whole notion of an ultimatum is kind of problematic to me. I believe that there are probably instances where you can issue an ultimatum that aren't toxic, but overwhelmingly, I believe that ultimatums are toxic. Like, I believe that if you're issuing an ultimatum to somebody that you're dating in order to assert a boundary, like for your own protection, your own emotional and psychological well-being, but it has absolutely nothing to do with manipulating the other person, which is a difficult feat, I would argue, then I don't see anything wrong with it. But overwhelmingly, when you're issuing an ultimatum to somebody, usually it's because you're trying to force them into doing what you want them to do, which we would call manipulation. So the premise on the face of it is just manipulation central. It is people trying to get, sorry, there's a siren, hold on a second. Ooh, this coffee is good. Oh my goodness. Y'all, I'm sorry. I know that this coffee is not technically in season right now, so I apologize for like really going on about a coffee that's not available to you. But listen, when it comes back out in February, please listen to me. This is delicious. You might also need to have an espresso machine. I don't know. Anyway, so on the face of it, the premise of the show is a little bit toxic, right? I want to get married, and instead of saying that I'll break up with you, I'm gonna put us through this weird show to get you to propose to me. It's very odd. So the way that the show works is that these couples come on. There's one person who's issued the ultimatum. There's one person who is kind of maybe reluctant to take next steps. And so the premise of the show is like switching couples or switching partners, kind of a thing. You can see whether or not the grass is greener on the other side, and thus make a decision as to whether or not you want to get married and have kids, I guess. Now, I just want to say that as somebody who I'm not elderly, but I'm also not in my early 20s. As somebody who has lived through my early 20s, well, I'll say this. I am approaching this as somebody who is not heterosexual. And I believe that the pressure for heterosexual people in general, but heterosexual women in particular, to get married is insane. For me as a child, I was of the mindset that I didn't even want to get married. I was of the mindset that I didn't even want to have kids until I found that those are things that you can do with a woman. And I was like, oh, okay, then I'm down for those things. But when it was men, I was like, I'm going to refrain from the whole nothing. So I feel that's what I felt watching this show, is a bit of that societal pressure. It's not even that it's societal pressure, because it wasn't like these women were talking. It wasn't just women that were lodging the ultimatum, but it wasn't that they were speaking as though some outside force was making them feel inadequate because they weren't married yet, or they weren't on the road to marriage. I know from having grown up around all of my female friends and all that. It's slightly different for Black women, but overwhelmingly for women, it's so deeply ingrained so early on. Like, you're watching kids movies and things like that where you're being shown that that's kind of like what you should be aspiring to, or what your role is, as an adult woman when you grow up. Like, it's so deeply ingrained that by the time that you hit your early 20s, I feel like a panic is what it feels like. Not on my part, because I rejected the whole notion of that. But for heterosexual women, I feel like there's a panic that can take place of like, I need these things to line up in the exact way that I envisioned, in the exact way that I was told that they would. My advice to anybody who's in their early 20s would be to refrain, to be perfectly honest. Even if you are 22, 23, 24 years old, and you are absolutely certain that you found the love of your life, because I'm not saying that that's not possible. It's obviously possible. My advice as somebody of indiscriminate age, but that's not in their early 20s, my advice would be to wait. Just live just a little bit more life, please. Your brain does not stop growing until you're 25. Especially if you're like, there are a lot of shifts that take place in that very specific period of your life. You're a different person at 18 than you are at 19, than you are at 20, than you are at 21. Like, there's a lot of shifts, especially if you're somebody that goes off to college, or if you end up in graduate school, or, you know what I'm saying, there's a lot of different shifts that take place. You're like a completely different person because of all of these shifts. And if you're making a commitment to somebody prior to all of those shifts, you might be upset with the results on the other end of it, is all that I'm saying. I've seen it before. When I went off to college, there were plenty of people who were dating their high school sweetheart, and things got a little tricky. I'm saying they didn't make it through freshman year. So my advice for anybody in their early 20s, even their mid 20s, I believe that even if you find the love of your life at 16, 17 years old, if you find the love of your life at 20 years old, that you just hold off until at least your late 20s. You know what I'm saying? I think that there's a lot of things that you need to go through as an individual and also as a couple before you take that step. And that was very evident in this show. So I'm gonna put that out there. So yeah, there weren't very many men who lodged. I think there's 2 guys. Out of the 6 couples, 4 of the women were the ones who gave the ultimatum, and 2 men gave the ultimatum. And I don't know, overwhelmingly the pushback to getting married was that they were just too young. And I agree with that. I don't see anything wrong with saying I'm not financially ready yet. I'm not, you know what I'm saying? I'm not in a place where I can be married to another person yet. Especially considering that these people had been dating it's not like they had been dating for like 10 years. They had been dating for 2 years or 3 years. You know what I'm saying? It's okay to date somebody for 2 to 3 years and not be married yet. I would start to feel, if marriage is something that's important to you, I would start to feel some sort of anxiety maybe after 5 years. It's like, okay, well, what are we doing now? You know what I'm saying? By that point, if you've lived together, like, I feel like it's important to live with a person first. It's important to know all of their weird, you know what I'm saying, their weird quirks, all kinds of things. What are their goals? What are their aspirations? Do they have goals? Do they have aspirations? Are you going to expect them to be a little bit more aggressive with goals and aspirations in the future, and they're just not that type of person? You know what I'm saying? You got to be ready for all of the different things that life is going to throw at you. I think that being that young is... So anyway, let's see. The only thing that I'm not all that interested in going down the line with, like, specific individuals per se. The only thing that I will say is that there were 2 couples that kind of concerned me. There's Lauren and Nate, where the one couple, the guy is the one who gave the ultimatum. He's 30. He's 4 years older than his girlfriend Lauren, who's 26. He wants to get married and have kids, and she does not want to get married, and she does not want to have kids. And somehow, after I think the first episode or second episode, they ended up engaged. So I don't know what to say about... I don't know. That's the thing, is that I'm not all that interested in these people as individuals. I am interested in the psychological dynamics at play. So one thing that I will say that I noticed about this show is that, one, they're just young. So my thing is, when you get into the manipulation game with people who are very young, they usually succumb to the manipulation, right? Like, I remember a distinct shift at an indeterminate age that's above 25, even though I may or may not be above the age of 25, where I just didn't want to put up with certain things anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I feel like most people, I feel, hit that in their mid-20s. Like, in their mid-20s, that's when they're like, okay, this is what I will put up with. This is what I won't put up with. There's a lot of toxicity in your early 20s. And I feel like there's 2 different things at play here. Is that these people have largely just been in a committed relationship through the early 20s. So they've just shielded themselves from all of the toxicity that's out there in the world, which, good for you. But if this is not the person that you're supposed to be with, if this is not the person that's going to last long term, then you're just prolonging that process. I don't want to say that that's... How do I want to say it? In dating people, you learn a lot about yourself. In dating different people, you learn a lot about yourself. In dating the same person, at such an early age, you don't learn much about yourself. And that was very evident in this show. People had goals in mind. And it's okay to have goals. But what was really alarming to me watching this show is that they had the goal regardless of the person that was kind of with them. They were at that point in their minds. They were like, I've attached a certain goal in my mind to a certain age. I want to have kids by this age. I want to be married by this age. I want to be in a house by this age. And at this point, we're getting closer to the deadline. So either you gonna do it or somebody else is gonna do it. And they were like, when they switched partners and they were dating somebody else's boyfriend or girlfriend, that was overwhelmingly the conversation. Like, they were not going into detail about each other's personalities, like, I like this about you or that about, you know what I'm saying? They were saying, like, this person I've spent 3 years with has yet to ask me to get married. So if I like you more, we need to get married in the next 2 weeks or something crazy like that. Which, what? Why would you think that would be successful? Which shows me that they've missed out on a lot of that dating piece. Like, you have to, when you date people, you start over. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're not starting at 3 years. You're not starting at 2 years. You're starting at 0. So that means that if you're leaving this person behind because they don't want to marry you, that means you have to start through the talking phase again. You have to start going through, you know what I'm saying? And that, I think that was the piece that was missing in this show, is that you have to, it doesn't make sense to pair up a whole bunch of people who have been in long-term relationships, because all that they ended up doing was to each other about their partners and not really getting to know each other all that well. You need to provide multiple options to these people so that they know that the person that they're with is who they want to be with. Now, unsurprisingly, the vast majority of them were kind of like starting to, I don't know, they all kind of wavered a little bit. So there were 2 couples that got engaged fairly quickly, like almost in the first episode, and they kind of like bounced. So, I mean, good for them. It seemed a little weird, you know what I'm saying? Why did you have to come on this reality TV show to do this? Whatever. They're gone. But, there was, one couple, who was it? It was Madeline and Colby. Oh my God. That was one of the couples where the man in the couple gave the ultimatum. And he wants kids and to get married, and she wasn't ready for that. Madeline is 24 and Colby is 25. So he was obsessive about her in a way that was a bit alarming to me. He pretty much shut down the whole entire, he lodged the ultimatum. He was not actually open to dating anybody else. So when they cohabitate for a couple weeks or something like that. So they switch. This whole entire show is a train wreck. So they take long-term couples that have been dating for years. Somebody issues an ultimatum. They mix up the couples so that they're with different people. And then they put them in an apartment for several weeks and they date each other. Unsurprisingly, most of the couples just ended up, like I said, back and forth about the person that they came there with. But Colby was kind of disturbing to me. But they ended up married in the end, so I guess I don't know. I don't know how to talk about, like, I don't actually care about the people. I just like the psychology behind it. So out of this entire thing, I think only one couple actually ended up switching, which was Ray and Zay. April and Jake broke up, Ray and Zay broke up, and Jake and Ray started dating each other, which good for them. They said that they had a whole lot in common. They seemed like the only ones that actually liked each other. A lot of them were kind of lying about liking each other, which was weird. They actually seemed to like each other, which great for them. So they ended up together. Everybody else, April, who was baby crazy at 23, ended up alone. And Zay, who was kind of like a party influencer guy, also ended up alone. But I didn't want to get too deep into like them as people because I don't actually particularly care. I wanted to circle back to Four Colored Nerds and their podcast. The title of the podcast that I'm talking about is called "Is Healthy Black Love Possible on Reality Television?" And in it they discuss whether or not they discuss how reality TV shows, dating shows, can be harmful to Black people and particularly to Black women because it takes a lot of the societal how can I explain it? It takes all of the underlying issues within romantic relationships in the world and creates the exact same thing on like a micro level, but like on TV so that we can see it. So it takes a lot of like microaggressions, a lot of like racism, a lot of colorism, a lot of, you know what I'm saying, misogyny, particularly against Black women, and puts it on display on television to the detriment of Black contestants on there. So they were really concerned when they were discussing this on this podcast about how it affects Black people's mental health, which I think is a valid way of looking at this. You know what I'm saying? I don't too much care about like reality television per se, but I do, if there were a really thoughtful reality TV dating show that really did take into account Black people's mental health and various aspects that I feel like a lot of white TV producers don't take into consideration when they're choosing contestants and when they're coming up with premises and things like that. They really did take a good, thoughtful deep dive into that topic. And if there were a TV show that put mental health first, Black people's mental health first, and was serious about helping facilitate Black couples, I would absolutely watch it. And particularly if they somehow found a way to make a gay version of that. Listen to me. If there's anybody out there, out of the 5 people that regularly watch my videos, if any of y'all have any kind of control over reality TV dating shows and somehow can manage to make like a Black queer reality TV dating show and have therapists involved, listen. I don't know what kind of ratings you'll get, but you'll definitely get me watching. So I will watch it. But yeah, so I wanted to take that perspective and apply it to this show. So it's kind of different because their concern when they were discussing it was that they were concerned that in shows where there are people who are not part of couples, who are coming there to find somebody, individuals, that often they often pair Black women with Black men who don't typically date Black women, and how that can sometimes be harmful. They also sometimes they'll have Black men that are on the show that are very much into this, the I don't even know what you would call it. The man leads, you know what I'm saying? I guess the biblical traditional Christian values version of Black marriage kind of a thing. The church's version of Black marriage. Men who desire to kind of, I don't see anything wrong with being a leader if that's your thing. If you are a born leader, I kind of have a problem with the notion of belittling other people to be the leader. And that nuance kind of comes into play sometimes in Black reality TV couples. I don't know. So, with this show, because they were already part of couples, there was one Black couple, and then there was, there's one Black couple, which is Shanique and Randall. Shanique's 24, and Randall is 26. Zay is a Black man. Zay is dating Ray, who is a biracial girl, and Jake is a biracial man. Jake and Ray ended up together in biracial union, and they went off and, you know what I'm saying? Now, I don't know if this was editing or what, but Shanique is the only Black woman there. who's not biracial. Shanique's the only black woman there. And I don't know if it's editing or if it was actually her personality or what, but they kind of made it seem like she was a bit aggressive, just a tad. She brought up sex pretty early. When they moved in together, when she ended up with Zay, which is the other black man that's there. She came with the black man who is Randall and ended up with Zay, who is a black man. When they started cohabitating, she was discussing like how she moves throughout her living space without clothes on. Like she was being kind of like suggestive, just a little bit. I don't know. Initially, that kind of put a kind of a bad taste in my mouth because I was like, I mean, it means that she was kind of taking the show seriously, kind of, because there were a lot of people who were not. They were like, you know, we're in this room, but no. And that's kind of how Zay was initially. But I don't know. I don't know if it was editing or whatever. But towards the end, it seems like she came from a very good family. She seemed like a decent woman. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know. To me, how can I explain it? I feel like I feel like I don't know. I don't know what to say about Shanique. She ended up getting married to Randall in the end. But I think what happened was that Zay scared her. I think that Zay scared her away. To be perfectly honest with you, he was kind of standoffish in the beginning, but once he started to kind of have problems. So the way that the show worked was that the couples switched partners for a couple weeks, and then they went back to their original couples for a couple weeks and lived in the same building or whatever, like so that production could like follow them. So they were back with their original people, and as you can probably imagine, you know, 2 or 3 weeks with somebody who's not your long-term partner, of course, brings up questions about your relationship. And so during that period of time where everybody was back with their original partners, a lot of people got into arguments. A lot of people had a lot of disagreements. Shanique and Randall had a disagreement, and I don't know. I just felt like they painted her trying to get a little bit more of an emotional commitment out of him, or a little bit more from him, as her being too aggressive, which I have a problem with. You know what I'm saying? Like, if that, I think that to the point of, for colored nerds, Brittany and Eric, who are the hosts on there, that if there were a black production team behind this, would they have painted her as seeming aggressive just for wanting a definitive answer from her boyfriend? I don't know. Towards the end, I didn't get that vibe from her. But what was interesting is that when Zay, the other black man that's there, was having problems with his girlfriend, he runs to Shanique to complain about what's going on in his relationship. Now, Zay is an interesting character because, I shouldn't say character, he's a real man. Zay is interesting because you can tell that he's had a hard childhood, not unheard of in the black community, right? He's had a tough childhood, and it's made him kind of like closed off emotionally. But what he does, which the whole show should just be called Manipulation. Just get rid of the title of Ultimatum. It just needs to be called Manipulation because that's all that it was. So the issue with Zay that I noticed immediately when he started actually talking is that when he started to feel himself losing his girlfriend, he did this thing where he would cry in front of her and say like, you know what I'm saying, lodge complaints against her. And then when she kind of tried to discuss things with him, because she's the one who lodged the ultimatum, right? She's the one who wanted more from him. He's an influencer, he's a club promoter, He's out late at night. Um, she wanted him to kind of let go of the party dude lifestyle and settle down with her, and he wasn't ready to do that yet. And so, so when she goes off and starts dating someone else, he feels her, when he starts to feel her kind of pulling away, that's when he starts to have these emotional outbursts. And when she says, like, hey, you stay out all night, you don't tell me where you are, when I call you don't answer the phone, like, he shuts her out. And anytime that anybody has any complaints about him, whether his girlfriend's mother even was complaining to him about him, he just shuts people out. He shuts down. He's like, I don't want to listen to it. And so when he gets to that point with his girlfriend, because he feels her pulling away, or because they broke up, he then runs to Shanique, the only black woman that's there, and the person that he was in the apartment with, to complain about how she's pulled away and all that, expecting that she would kind of take his side, understand his point of view, that kind of a thing. And then she just kind of added on, like, no, I've noticed these kind of issues. I've noticed that you got these issues too. Like, you can't just shut down in the face of these criticisms, because they're valid criticisms. And this is after he had spent all night out. Like, I don't even understand why they let him leave, because I thought that the set was closed. But he went out all night, left his girlfriend, his actual girlfriend, in the apartment until 8 o'clock in the morning. Didn't answer any phone calls, didn't answer any text messages, turned off his location, all of that. Like, shut her out because he was feeling some type of way about her pulling away from him. Then when he gets back, he does this weird thing where he's like all up on her, which was weird. Like, it was very disturbing. Like, he would not leave her alone. She kept trying to run away from him, and he just like followed her around the apartment. Like, why are you running away from me? What is wrong with you? Like, that kind of a thing, which was very odd because you had just spent all night out. Like, you just got back at 8 o'clock in the morning from clubbing. And so when that tactic didn't work, of asking why she was shutting him out after he had disappeared all night, he then runs to Shanique to try and find validation for having been out all night for no reason. Which I thought was an interesting dynamic. Now, I don't know how much of the production team I don't know how much they had to do with them actually ending up together as part of the experiment, like Shanique and Zay. I don't know if they said, like, well, she's black and he's black, so they should end up together. Like, I don't know if that's what happened. I don't know if it's that, to the point of for color nerds, Brittany and Eric, I don't know if it's that no one else chose Shanique, because they didn't really show very much of the, like, they showed that there were some people who were immediately chosen, and then there were some people that were kind of like stragglers. And the stragglers are the ones who immediately proposed to their partners and then left. I don't know. I just felt like there was something at play there. So I don't even know how to articulate my thoughts around that. I just feel like it could have been better if there needed to be a therapist there. I feel like dating shows in general just need a therapist. They just do. There were plenty of instances, and I think that the premise alone would probably scare off any therapist worth their salt. There needed to be somebody there, especially when Zay was kind of having his breakdown. There needed to be somebody there to intervene and say, like, okay, so this is manipulation here, this is passive aggression here, this is, you know what I'm saying, why don't you want to vocalize what you're thinking? Why are you staying out all night? Why do you feel that she's being over aggressive? Why do you feel like there needed to be that element in it? And that's probably the only, well, there's a lot of criticisms that I have this show, but I feel like that's the major one of this one, and probably all dating shows, is that they need to have a therapist present. So yeah, I haven't watched the like finale. I watched the latest episode that they came out with, where a few people proposed, a few people broke up. I don't know. Like, I didn't say that I like I said, I don't have a tremendous amount to talk about with this. I just thought it was interesting. The premise of the show just seemed so toxic from the beginning that there was no way that I'm surprised that anybody ended up engaged in the end. Like, Colby was actually really terrifying to me. Colby, like, if anybody's looking for a good representation of like a narcissist, Colby is a great representation of a narcissist. Because it was weird. On the first day, he was talking to all these different people, and he was essentially just saying everything that they wanted to hear from him. And I don't know, like, he was surprised that all of these women ended up liking him. Particularly Alexis ended up liking him. And then he basically said that I'm not that into you, or whatever. Like, I told you that I wasn't that into you. And she was like, she ran up to everybody and said, like, hey, I don't like Colby. He's like a serial killer or something. Like, he's a narcissist or whatever. I don't like him. And she was right in the end, because that man is weird. Is all I gotta say. Colby is a strange bird, man. He's the one that gave the ultimatum. His girlfriend didn't want to get married. They separated, and Colby went off with April. And Colby did not even try dating April at all. All he did was talk about his girlfriend Madeline with April the entire time that they were gone. They got back together. The instant that he felt that April was pulling away, he ran off to a nightclub or whatever and started, like, he essentially cheated on her, but not like sex wise. And then I don't know, they had a weird argument, and then somehow now they're engaged, or they're married. He proposed to her in the most recent episode. And then he was like, well, I've got another surprise. Do you want to marry me right now? Which I thought was insane. You know what I'm saying? Like, you said that you don't want to marry this man. Y'all had a crazy argument in front of her friends. There's a trash truck outside. I don't know if you can hear that. You had a crazy argument in front of her friends. They all said that you guys needed to not be together anymore. And then the next thing we know, not only are y'all engaged, but he wants to make sure that while the cameras are still rolling and while you're still, you know what I'm saying, while you're kind of trapped, I would argue, that y'all get married. I don't know where they got an officiant from. Where does the marriage, who signed the marriage license? You know what I'm saying? How did they get all that together that quickly? It just is manipulation central, is all that I'm saying. Yeah, it's just a bad, like, it's a terrible show, y'all. Like, it's just a really, really bad show. It's one of those shows that you kind of like hate watch only because people are talking about it. But if I were to watch it outside of context, like if no one was talking about it, I wouldn't watch it out of context. To be perfectly honest with you, it's terrible. Netflix is bad at producing reality TV shows because they put so little effort into. I think that Netflix decided that they wanted to do. I think that Netflix is trying to budget, is what they're trying to do. I think that they've hit that wall where they understand that just because you can only have so many subscribers, and either you're going to raise the price of the service or you're going to run out of money at some point, because, you know, somebody could pay $5 a month and watch 20 programs, or somebody could pay $5 a month and watch one movie. You still getting the same amount of money, but you had to pay all of this production cost. So they decided that they were going to come up with reality TV shows that they put little to no effort into, just to try and get people to sign up for the service, I guess. But we can see that that you put little to no effort into this, little to no thought. I don't think that this is a winning premise for a show, to be perfectly honest. I don't think it can be saved, because you're taking, first and foremost, I don't believe that people this young should be getting married, first and foremost. That's just my personal opinion. feel how you want to about people in their mid-20s getting married. It's not unheard of, obviously. But that much psychological manipulation taking place for people who really are not yet at an age where they can kind of fend it off, and no one intervening in that is a huge thing for me. But then also, what do you, like, at the core of it, what do you do about the fact that these people have been dating for years? You're not providing them necessarily with options. You're just providing them with other people who have dated their partner for years. Like, I think if they could figure out a way to get around that hurdle, maybe it could be a good show. But to me, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to bring people who've been like in committed relationships for years and have them intermingle with each other, because all they did was talk about their partner with another person. That's all that they really did. So yeah, I hated the show. I don't know why I felt the need to talk about it, but I felt the need to talk about it. Because I think that the whole notion of approaching dating shows from the perspective of blackness is interesting. You know what I'm saying? If there was a good, like, I feel like there's so much psychological work that needs to be done, especially in this day and age of like, what are we calling it? The manosphere, the black incel movement, and then the black divine feminine movement response to it. I think I've mentioned that earlier at some point, where there's black men who are rejecting, I don't even know how to explain it, but men are essentially being radicalized online. And women are also technically being radicalized online. And something about that pressure that I was talking about earlier, that pressure that women feel to get married at a very young age and have kids by a certain age. The way that the world is set up now, all of those goals are being pushed further and further back. It just is the reality of the situation. You have to be because the way, like, we ain't got the money like that. You know what I'm saying? You can't be having a baby super young just because you think that you should be having a baby super young. You know what I'm saying? Can you afford to have a baby yet? And I don't believe that you should commit your life to anybody before, first and foremost, your brain has finished forming. But also, have you lived together? You know what I'm saying? What's your financial situation looking like? You know what I'm saying? Do you want the same things? You've got couples in here who are forcing themselves to be together in spite of not wanting the same things. If I don't want kids and you do want kids, we don't need to be together. There's no such thing as a compromise between those two things, right? If I don't want kids, there's no such thing as a compromise for me with somebody who wants kids. If I do want kids, there's no such thing as a compromise for me with somebody who does not want kids. And yet sorry guys, I really should have had like a stronger outline for this. I wasn't sure what exactly I wanted to talk about with this show, and so I was like, I'm gonna wing it. And so now I feel like I'm rambling just a little bit, but hopefully this makes sense. So there were couples on there, and this is the aside that I was going to make, or that I was going to say, is I feel as though there are some people, because they are not, like, as somebody who's a black gay person, I've already rejected the notion that I'm going to have any kind of a normal relationship, or a quote unquote societally normal relationship, right? So that changes what my expectations are in terms of, you know, marriage, kids, those kinds of things. Like, I'm very much of the mindset, like, if I find the right person, I find the right person. If we end up having kids, we end up having kids. I would like to get married. I would like to have kids, but I don't have a set date for that. And I certainly don't have like an age attached to that. When it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, blah. But like, I feel like when you're somebody who exists within, you know, the status quo, within heteronormativity, those kinds of things, like, you're so close to, you've never kind of been forced to live out. One second, there's another. When you aren't forced to live outside of heteronormativity, it's like you succumb to the pressures of all of those kinds of deadlines, I guess, like expectations. I feel what it felt to me like when I was watching that is that very similar to like what was mentioned in if you watched my second episode discussing the Laverne Cox show when Jen Richards was talking. She was saying that there are people who are comforted by the idea of, well, this is my gender, this is how I'm supposed to act, I'm supposed to date these people, that's how they're supposed to act, I'm supposed to want these things, they're supposed to want these things, and we're supposed to have these things together by whatever age. And they're very comforted by that idea. But what I saw in this show was a group of people who were actually being tormented by that. You know what I'm saying? If you let go of that expectation that you should have kids or a wife or a husband or whatever, picket fence kind of a life by a certain age, I feel like it relieves so much anxiety. And it's so much harder to achieve those things nowadays because of the way that the world is kind of set up. And I don't know. It's just so odd to watch as somebody who's never going to live by the rules of heteronormativity. It's so odd to watch such young people being basically stressed and tormented by these ideals, which is why I think it would be so interesting to do like a queer dating show, to be perfectly honest with you. Like, not that young queer people would be any better with, I feel like anybody under the age of 25 is gonna have a hard time being definitive of what they want, unless it's something that somebody else told them that they want, which is the premise of this show essentially. But if you got like some like people who are slightly older, you know what I'm saying, late 20s, give me late 20s queer folks, you know what I'm saying, I just feel like that would be so interesting. The dating dynamics, I would love to see, not the same show, because again, this concept is trash. I don't believe that there's anything that you can do to this premise for it to not be toxic. Like, ultimatums overwhelmingly are toxic. I can't think of, I'm sure that there probably is an example of an ultimatum that's not toxic, but you would have to be a very sophisticated psychological mastermind to be able to apply it. And in that instance, I would argue you probably more be using your powers for manipulation than anything else. I don't think that this premise can be saved. It's awful, it's terrible, and it's manipulative. And I don't think that 20-something-year-olds, early 20-something-year-olds should be lodging ultimatums. And I don't think that early 20-something-year-olds should be the subject of or have ultimatums lodged against them. So it's just a terrible premise for a show. But if you get the queers involved, you make them a little bit older, and you do literally anything else, not this, I think it could be good. I would watch it, maybe, depending on how many black people were there, because I don't. And have therapists involved. I feel like obviously Netflix is not gonna do it because they're like in a clickbait era kind of a thing, but like there's so much that could be learned if there was a TV show, a reality TV dating show, where there's so much that could be learned if you took, like, allow people to do their weird toxic stuff, but then have somebody interject and say, okay, so stop, pause. Did you know that this was manipulation? Did you know that this was toxic? Like, did you know that you're not supposed to talk to somebody like that? Did you know that you are projecting your expectations onto this person? Did you know that that's unrealistic? You know what I'm saying? Those kinds of things. I feel like there's so much that could be learned, especially from a day and age where people, like I said, are being radicalized online when it comes to romantic relationships. I feel like on the male side, there's a lot of societal expectations that they are rejecting, and instead of saying society needs to let go of these expectations of me, they're kind of lashing out. And then on the woman's side, it's like we're at a severe lack of suitable partners. What can we do to change ourselves to find suitable partners? And I feel like that's also not necessarily the right. It's like introspection. I don't see anything wrong with introspection, but you get into a bad place when you start. They're moving the trash cans again. So I don't see anything wrong with being introspective per se. But I think that we have a crisis of too many people trying to look outside of themselves to find I don't want to say validation because that's not necessarily what the word that I'm looking for. There's too many people looking outside of themselves to define who they are for them. Does that make sense? There's too many people who, like, I don't see anything wrong with wanting to get married and wanting to have kids. My concern is when you get to the point where you're like, one, I'm going to manipulate somebody into this situation, which both men and women did that in this show. I have a problem with it when, one, I guess two now, if you've not done the internal work to say, is this something that I actually want? For one, do I actually want this? And then three is accepting that that might not be something that happens and that you can't force things to happen. I think is what I would like the lesson to be from this show and kind of the way that people are approaching dating these days. I'm saying this as the hopefully the wise gay to the heterosexuals. Hopefully that's what's happening. Maybe I sound crazy. But what I notice is a lot of force. I don't think that that's unique to heterosexual people. I've seen it in the gay sphere, the gay verse, the LGBTQ verse. I've seen it because honestly, the LGBTQ community just mimics heteronormativity. They really do. But for the moment, we're talking about straight people. I think that when you exist as a straight person, so much of who you are and what you want is defined for you that it maybe is terrifying to have somebody or to have to figure that out for yourself. And so, but now we live in a day and age where there's a lot of people who are willing to step in and define that for you. And that may or may not be good. I would argue oftentimes it's not good, especially if the person who's doing so is not a licensed psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist. If they're not that, I would question what they're saying, to be perfectly honest with you. But there's a lot of people with a lot of microphones, just like me, saying things to you just like I am. And it's not always good advice. And sometimes it's very harmful. Like, I'm actually really concerned with what's going on with the Black incel movement. That's actually really concerning to me. Because it's not good advice. Like, I understand frustration around masculinity and those kinds of things. Like, I understand that all of those things have been defined for you by someone else. And largely for Black men, there's a lot of things that they have been told that they need to achieve to be men that they have been deliberately kept from achieving because of racism. And so I get it. Like, I get that there's frustration around that, but the solution to that is not to lash out at the women in your lives or to blame women for not being able to achieve all of the things that you've been told by white society that you need to achieve. But on the flip side, I can understand saying, like, okay, women shouldn't, because there are a lot of women too that are like, well, you need to be driving a Rolls Royce at 19, and you know what I'm saying, you need to own a 6-bedroom house, and you need to, you know what I'm saying, those kinds of things. You need to be a multi-millionaire, and if you're not, then you're a failure in my eyes. Like, there's a lot of women out there that are like that. I would argue that they've also been radicalized. Yeah, I don't know. It's like, oh, I feel for the young folks. I think that's it. That's all. I think that's where I'm at. I feel for the babies. You know what I'm saying? They're going through a lot. They just want to be with somebody. They just want to be certain about their future. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there telling them a lot of BS. So, I don't know. Just because you don't get married at 23 doesn't mean that the world is over. Just because you don't have kids at 23 doesn't mean that the world is over. You got like a ton of time. Like, you could not have kids for a full decade and still be within a good, you know what I'm saying, a good window to have kids. You're so young, like it's crazy. So yeah, I think that that's all that I really wanted to say. I hope that any of that made any sense, because I had an outline, but it wasn't really a great outline, and so I just ended up rambling. And I don't even know that y'all care about this topic all that much either. If you're in my audience, you know what I'm saying, if you're into the same things that I'm into, then you probably didn't even watch this show. You're probably like, why am I talking about it? I don't know. I enjoy talking about psychology. I feel like that's come across so far. I enjoy talking about how people's brains work. I don't too much care about reality television and personalities and things like that, as evidenced by the fact that I barely talked about personalities. So yeah, hopefully I will have a more cogent, comprehensive, you know what I'm saying, put together outline for Monday's episode. Or something crazy might happen. Who knows? We live in a crazy day and age. Something crazy might happen and it'll give me something to talk about. Because I have a whole bunch of like half ideas. And I just maybe need to finish fleshing them out. But when I do, I'll probably have something better for y'all on Monday. But if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you could subscribe to the channel, I would love that. Like the video, share the video. I would appreciate that. And until I see you next time, be good.